In the quiet corners of the Pacific Northwest, where the rain-soaked forests and rugged coastlines often conjure images of peace, a tale of hatred and violence unfolded between 2011 and 2012 that would shatter lives across multiple states. Holly Ann Grigsby, a young woman from Portland, Oregon, became an unlikely accomplice to a string of brutal murders that spanned Washington, Oregon, and California, alongside her partner and self-proclaimed neo-Nazi, David Joey Pedersen. Grigsby embarked on a killing spree that would leave 4 innocent people dead and a nation grappling with the horrors of extremist violence. This is the story of Holly Ann Grigsby, a woman whose troubled past, misguided ideologies, and toxic relationships spiraled into a nightmare of bloodshed. It is a chilling reminder of how hatred and personal vulnerabilities can collide with devastating consequences. Holly Ann Grigsby was born on August 24, 1985, in Portland, Oregon. Her early years were marked by instability, neglect, and feelings of alienation. Growing up in a working-class household, Grigsby often felt invisible, overshadowed by the struggles of her family to make ends meet. School offered little solace. She was described as a loner who struggled to form meaningful relationships and often acted out to gain attention. As a teenager, Grigsby turned to drugs and petty crime, finding solace in the chaos that distracted her from the emptiness of her life. She dropped out of high school and drifted aimlessly, bouncing between jobs and falling into a series of toxic relationships. Each step further eroded her sense of self-worth, leaving her increasingly susceptible to the influence of others. By her early 20s, Grigsby had gravitated toward extremist ideologies. She found a twisted sense of belonging in the rhetoric of white supremacy, which offered her a simplistic explanation for her failures and a scapegoat for her pain. In the hateful rhetoric of neo-Nazism, Grigsby found a purpose, albeit one that would lead her down a path of destruction. In 2010, Grigsby's life took a dark turn when she met David Joseph Pedersen, a man with a history of violence and a deep-seated hatred fueled by extremist beliefs. Pedersen, recently released from prison after serving time for robbery, was a self-proclaimed neo-Nazi who viewed himself as a soldier in an imagined race war. Pedersen's worldview was shaped by years of bitterness and rage. He blamed his father, David Red Pedersen, for the abuse he endured as a child and harbored an intense hatred for minorities and those who opposed his ideology. When Grigsby met Pedersen, she was drawn to his confidence and conviction, mistaking his hate-fueled rhetoric for strength. Their relationship quickly became toxic and codependent. Pedersen fed Grigsby's need for validation, while she became his willing accomplice, eager to prove her loyalty. Together, they formed a deadly partnership, with Pedersen as the dominant force and Grigsby as the devoted follower. The pair's killing spree began on September 26, 2011, in Everett, Washington. Pedersen's father, David Red Pedersen, and his stepmother, Leslie Pedersen, were their first victims. Pedersen had long blamed his father for his traumatic childhood and the suicide of his mother, and he saw his stepmother as complicit in these perceived injustices. Arriving at the Pedersen home, the couple's murderous intent was clear. Pedersen shot his father point-blank in the head as he sat in the living room, a calculated act of vengeance. Leslie, who had been away at the time, returned home later that day. Grigsby and Pedersen ambushed her, tying her up before stabbing her multiple times in the neck. Grigsby later admitted to participating in the murder, claiming she wanted to prove her devotion to Pedersen. After the murders, the couple fled the scene in the family's car, leaving behind a house stained with blood and filled with silence. Their actions marked the beginning of a cross-state killing spree fueled by hate and a delusional sense of purpose. From Everett, Grigsby and Pedersen headed south into Oregon. Their crimes became increasingly erratic and driven by extremist ideology. They began targeting individuals who, in their warped view, represented the enemies of their imagined cause. On October 3, 2011, they encountered Cody Myers, a 19-year-old college student in Newport, Oregon. Myers was a deeply religious and kind-hearted young man who had been attending a jazz festival when he crossed paths with the murderous duo. Grigsby and Pedersen mistakenly believed Myers was Jewish based on his name, a fatal assumption that sealed his fate. The couple lured Myers into their car under the guise of friendliness before shooting him multiple times. They abandoned his body in a wooded area, leaving his family to face the unbearable anguish of his sudden and senseless death. The murder of Cody Myers was a turning point in their spree, drawing national attention to the random and hate-driven nature of their crimes. Continuing their journey south, Grigsby and Pedersen crossed into California, where their spree took another dark turn. On October 5, 2011, in Eureka, they targeted Reginald Clark, a 53-year-old African-American man. Clark was chosen purely because of his race, a decision that underscored the couple's commitment to their extremist beliefs. The murder was particularly brutal. Clark was lured into their car and then executed in cold blood, his body discarded without a second thought. The randomness and cruelty of their actions left investigators scrambling to piece together a motive and establish a connection between the murders. As law enforcement agencies across 3 states worked to track the killers, Grigsby and Pedersen's luck began to run out. Their faces appeared on news broadcasts, and a multi-agency manhunt was launched. On October 7, 2011, they were apprehended in Yuba City, California, during a routine traffic stop. The stolen vehicle they were driving contained a trove of evidence linking them to the murders, including weapons, personal items belonging to the victims, and a chilling manifesto written by Pedersen outlining their hateful ideology. During their arrest, Pedersen remained defiant, declaring that their actions were justified by their beliefs. Grigsby, however, appeared shaken, the gravity of their crimes beginning to weigh on her. The trial of Holly Ann Grigsby and David Pedersen became a media spectacle, drawing attention to the dangers of extremist ideologies and the devastating consequences of hate. Prosecutors painted the couple as cold-blooded killers who were driven by a toxic mix of personal grievances and white supremacist beliefs. Grigsby attempted to downplay her role, claiming she acted out of fear and manipulation. She described Pedersen as a controlling figure who exploited her vulnerabilities and coerced her into participating in the murders. However, evidence presented at trial, including her active participation in Leslie Pedersen's murder and her role in luring victims, painted a different picture. In 2014, Grigsby pleaded guilty to federal charges of racketeering and murder. She avoided the death penalty but was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Pedersen also received a life sentence, ensuring that neither would ever walk free again. The killing spree left a trail of devastation in its wake. Families of the victims struggled to come to terms with the loss of their loved ones, grappling with the senselessness of the murders. Cody Myers' family, in particular, became vocal advocates against hate crimes, using their platform to promote tolerance and understanding. Grigsby's case also highlighted the dangers of radicalization and the vulnerabilities of individuals who become ensnared in extremist ideologies. Her story serves as a grim reminder of the consequences of unchecked hatred and the importance of addressing the root causes of radicalization. Holly Ann Grigsby's journey into darkness was marked by a toxic mix of personal pain, misguided beliefs, and a destructive relationship. Her actions, alongside David Pedersen, left a trail of death and despair across 3 states, forever altering the lives of their victims and their families. Though she will spend the rest of her life behind bars, the legacy of her crimes serves as a chilling reminder of how hatred and violence can fester in the shadows. Her story is a cautionary tale, a stark warning of the darkness that can emerge when ideology and vulnerability collide. As the prison gates closed behind Holly Ann Grigsby, the stark reality of her actions began to sink in. Stripped of her freedom, the woman who once followed a path of violence and hatred was now confined to the monotony of prison life. However, the weight of her crimes lingered, a constant reminder of the lives she had destroyed and the loved ones she had left grieving. In prison, Grigsby has reportedly been a withdrawn figure, while Pedersen remained defiant about his actions, steadfast in his extremist beliefs. Grigsby's demeanor appeared more complex. Fellow inmates described her as quiet and reflective, though some believed this was a facade to avoid confrontation in a harsh and unforgiving environment. Occasionally, she has spoken with prison counselors and reporters, offering glimpses into her psyche. Her words, though often guarded, reveal a woman wrestling with guilt, regret, and a lingering sense of confusion about how she became capable of such horrific acts. Whether these reflections are genuine or part of a broader strategy to garner sympathy is unclear. The story of Holly Ann Grigsby and David Pedersen is not just a tale of individual pathology, it is a dark reflection of societal issues that remain deeply rooted. Their killing spree brought to the forefront the dangers of radicalization, the fragility of vulnerable individuals, and the lethal consequences of hate-fueled ideologies. Experts in criminal psychology have examined the pair's relationship dynamics extensively, using their case as a lens through which to understand the power of toxic partnerships. Grigsby, with her history of instability and low self-esteem, became an easy target for manipulation. Pedersen's dominance over her was not just physical but psychological, feeding her a narrative that gave her a sense of purpose while simultaneously erasing her individuality. At the same time, their crimes highlighted the ongoing threat of domestic terrorism fueled by white supremacy in the United States. Organizations that track extremist groups noted a chilling increase in hate-driven violence, underscoring the importance of education, intervention, and vigilance in preventing similar tragedies. For the families of the victims, the pain has been unending. They have spoken out not only to remember their loved ones but also to try to prevent others from suffering similar losses. Cody Meyer's parents have tirelessly advocated for anti-hate initiatives, attending community events and speaking at schools to promote tolerance and understanding. Similarly, Leslie Pedersen's relatives have worked to raise awareness about domestic violence and the warning signs of escalating danger. While their loved ones can never return, their efforts aim to turn pain into a force for positive change, honoring the victims' memories by preventing future tragedies. Reginald Clark's family, too, has been vocal in condemning racially motivated violence. Their heartbreak, compounded by the senselessness of the crime, has driven them to push for stronger legislation against hate crimes and more resources for communities targeted by extremist groups. In the annals of true crime, Holly Ann Grigsby's name stands as a haunting example of how ordinary individuals can descend into the depths of darkness. Her crimes, driven by a toxic mixture of personal vulnerabilities and extremist ideologies, left a trail of death and devastation across the Pacific Northwest. Yet, her story is not just one of horror, it is a cautionary tale. It serves as a stark reminder of the consequences of hatred and the destructive power of radicalization. It highlights the importance of vigilance in identifying and addressing the warning signs of extremist behavior, as well as the need for compassion and support for those at risk of falling prey to such ideologies. In the end, the story of Holly Ann Grigsby and David Pedersen is a tragedy on multiple levels. It is a tragedy for the victims and their families, whose lives were forever altered by their senseless actions. It is a tragedy for Grigsby herself, who allowed her vulnerabilities and misguided beliefs to lead her down a path of violence and destruction. And it is a tragedy for society, which must grapple with the underlying issues that allowed such a dark chapter to unfold. Even as the world moves on, the echoes of their crimes remain a chilling reminder of the darkness that can lurk within, waiting to be unleashed. In the silence of her prison cell, Grigsby may reflect on the choices that led her here, but for those whose lives she shattered, the pain and loss endure, an unending testament to the true cost of hatred.